Hello, Richard. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Hi, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you, I believe, will be chairing the entire first day at Logipharma.
Yes, that's great. I'm delighted to be back. It's a venue I've been at for many years. I think it's a good opportunity for professionals to come together, and I'm delighted to be chairing it again this year.
That's fantastic. Well, what are you looking forward then most to finding out people's opinions on?
I think the industry is in a period of fairly dramatic change and very, very intense pressure in terms of performance from a growth and a cost perspective. My own organisation has done a substantial amount of work really looking at the effects of externalisation, the way the industry has increasingly looked to source both manufacturing and supply from external partners, and the results of that in terms of the complexity that often lies inside the supply chain. So understanding how people are managing that complexity is something which is particularly interesting to me.
So what are the current trends that you're seeing then with the way that people are handling this complexity?
It reflects in two aspects. One aspect is the pipeline of new products, both sourced internally but equally from external research and development partners, which bring with it challenges of the supply chain in terms of integrating existing suppliers and contracts to take those new products into the marketplace. And then secondly, in terms of sourcing strategies and the configuration of the manufacturing networks, the increasing move towards Southeast Asia, in particular China, sourcing for manufacturing, both as a route to enter into the Chinese market, but also as a route for export into the US and into Europe. Increasingly, as that externalization moves forward, then supply chain organizations need to become more professional in the way that they look at putting together very complex networks of suppliers to deliver products into their markets.
So how are people getting over this issue of visibility, which must be one of the harder things, is to actually see from end to end how it all fits together and how to streamline that process without causing other issues?
I think it's a real challenge, and it's one that the industry has not fully resolved at this point in time. Many people are looking to other industries for benchmarks, consumer goods, high-tech and electronics, and particularly how to look not only at your internal network, but particularly your external network as well of key suppliers, and understand the risks and implications of trying to manage a series of external contracts to deliver the sort of performance that you need from your own supply chain.
So how have you seen then the supply chain function develop over the past few years? Because it seems to have gone from a much more almost static role to one that seems very much more intrinsically part of the direction of a company.
I'd like to say that that's correct. I actually view that supply chain is still not the core topic on the CEO's agenda. The core topic on the CEO's agenda is portfolio, profit and sales. The supply chain is still on the back burner.
Is that a mistake?
I think that there is a significant risk and an issue with that, and you do see that particularly when you have issues that occur from time to time in supply chain and manufacturing, and therefore you ignore manufacturing supply at your peril.
How have you seen then people that have managed to get their voice heard at the top level? What approaches have they taken to get that buy-in?
It's very difficult. I mean, I think it's important that as a supply chain executive, you need a clarity of strategy, you need a clarity of direction in terms of where you're heading. You need to be very clear about how you perceive risk, measure risk, and then communicate that risk upwards to the manufacturing boards and to the pharmaceutical boards. From that, you can then set a very clear agenda for both managing the growth, the cost, and the risk that's inherent in the supply chain that you've got.
Now, before you did mention the emerging markets, specifically China, obviously it is very much on the up and up, but how over time do you expect this is going to change? Because it seems we're just beginning to approach this tipping point where the benefit of the cheap labour that was there before is just beginning to edge away as their economy improves, and actually we might see tables turn.
I'm not sure that's the real case for pharmaceuticals. My view is that most of the pharmaceutical companies have gone to China to penetrate the Chinese market and for intermediates and starting materials manufacturing. I'm not convinced yet that manufacturing of finished products for pharmaceuticals has ultimately all transitioned into China sourcing on the basis of cost. I think that that's a little bit of a fallacy. I do think there is still a tendency to push manufacturing towards lower cost sources, but there is still some caution in that approach, and I think that that's quite appropriate. As regulatory standards improve and increase in China, as the cost base does start to migrate, the opportunity for sourcing from China will shift over the next 5 to 10 years. And therefore, I do think there is still a case for manufacturing in Europe and in the US. And I think that case has still got to be clearly made.
So where do you then see supply chain, in that sense, globally speaking, moving in the next few years, perhaps even more than the next few years?
There's clearly emerging markets where you need to have local manufacturing for reimbursement. China, Russia, Brazil, many other markets which are opening. And ultimately, you need some manufacturing presence or packaging presence in those markets. So that will clearly develop. The portfolio will become more complex, and so the competence and capability of the supply chain organization has got to improve, and it has to internationalize. So having a US-dominated or focused supply chain capability is not going to be adequate. Having a European capability is not going to be adequate. You have to be able to internationalize supply chain. That means bringing in talents and skills from the emerging markets into your core teams to build that capability.
Well, if there's just one last question I can ask you then,
Sure.
As you said with the words talent, that was actually what I was going to move on to, and talent management. I think one of the things that is key as the role of supply chain develops is you need a very different type of skill set to really maximise that. What kind of recommendations are you making?
So talent's a very interesting topic. If you visit Southeast Asia, it is probably the number one topic on their minds, which is as they experience explosive growth, they do not have the local talent to be able to fuel and to support that phase of development. And therefore, what you see is a lot of European and US resources effectively putting the experience and the expertise into that development phase. I do think that talent, both in Europe and the US, still has to be fostered, but ultimately you do have to find a way to grow that international supply chain talent in these emerging markets. You need to start to think about rotation processes so that the people who understand the European market are starting to become more global in terms of their view and their capabilities.
Well, thank you very much, but unfortunately we are going to have to call it a day just there. But if people do want to find out more from Lodestone, where can they go? worldwideweb.lodestonemc.com, I think is the website. Alternatively, please reach for the partnership. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.